Ask Mixing with Mike. Low-level compression. This is something that's come up a bit recently where people were questioning what is low-level compression. The basic idea, if we have a dynamic range that sort of goes top to bottom with our audio, and we have an audio signal that goes through this dynamic range, there are basically two ways of kind of looking at how sound is processed, right? Or upward or downward in terms of the movement. So if I have a threshold, signals above threshold, if you're using compression, would be pulled downward, and that is downward compression. And that's the most common characteristic that we use, right? So the downward compression essentially is taking signals above threshold and then applying gain reduction accordingly. So the gain reduction is going downward. The other is downward expansion or gating, so that signals that fall below threshold get sent farther down. So this is downward expansion. The idea being that if you would use this for gating or for expanding the sound. So the higher you set the expansion, the more the audio gets dragged down. And usually those ratios are kind of light, or if it's a gate, then it's really heavy and the sound. So this is meant to get rid of noise. What's less known about is upward expansion. And upward expansion is sort of the opposite or the exact opposite of downward compression. So signals above threshold, instead of working on a ratio of say 2 to 1, would work on a ratio of 0.5 to 1. And the idea is that for every half dB above threshold, 1 dB is get out. So what that does is it takes signals and increases the transients. And this is a way of rebuilding transient peaks when they've been over-compressed or over-limited. So there's the upward expansion. And then there is also upward compression, and sometimes called low-level compression. And that's what we're going to get into today. So signals that fall below threshold get compressed and the gain gets pulled upward. So what happens is it's sort of like the opposite. You're taking this much energy and then what you're doing is you're compressing it together and making it appear in this area. So that's upward compression. And what's in this area here is mostly kind of presence and detail information. So here's where the power of a low-level compressor really kicks in. Waves has a couple of plugins that are really good at this. One is the max volume, which you see here, and the other one is it's not what is the other one? It's MV2. I'm sorry, and that's like a simplified version of this. So usually the characteristic of the low-level compression is one basic slider. So this just makes it more aggressive, soft or loud. That's just the characteristic vibe of it, whether it's aggressive sounding or whether it's more musical and soft sounding. So if I have some drums here, so this is as they are. When I bring up that low-level compression, you hear all the presence energy that's added back into the drum kit. And what you hear is like you can feel like the openness, right, and the character of the room. Like you can hear the reflections that are coming off the floor that are largely rejected by the close mics. And it also gives you a gain control so that you can go up or down to add onto it. This particular plugin does. And it's really just that simple. I've yet to see any low-level compressors that have like a whole lot of settings on them. There are very few that are out in the market at all in terms of low-level compression that actually have attack and release settings and things like that. Ratios and all of that sort of stuff, because it's sort of an upside down backward mentality or way of thinking from the way that you would work with a normal compressor. So that low-level compression is really, really powerful and a great way to bring presence energy. And also if you couple that with downward, what's really cool about this is you could also bring in a little bit of peak limiting so that you're kind of taking the top down and the bottom up, right? And you can see the gain reduction, right, and the gain addition over here, right, and there's obviously an addition of volume, right, so you can see here just the gain, so it would make this, if I just brought this down like a few dB to kind of make up for what was lost, you still hear the presence and openness of the energy. that's involved there. So it's really, really cool. And this is actually a really, really good plugin for this. So anyway, that's kind of our quick answer, right, for what is low-level compression in the Ask Mixing with Mike section. Yeah, Thomas, it's like a not. I don't know if it's necessary. You could use it for parallel compression. Like you could get extreme with the settings, and sometimes I've used this for parallel compression. But I kind of like it more on the stem processing area, where you could take all the work that you've done, and it's like taking a lens and focusing it in, right, to the exact, to like taking all the hard work that you've done on the individual tracks, and it's like zooming the lens in or getting it perfectly into focus so there's clarity on everything. And that's really where a lot of the low-level compression is really, really key. And you can really hear it. It's like, whoa, it's just like all of a sudden this vibrancy and presence energy comes in. And the thing you have to be careful about is it can end up being a little bit harsh and noisy sounding, because a lot of what's down there in that low-level stuff is noise. So you have to be cautious of that as well. Anyway, there's our low-level compression.